So, this is my camera bag. You might be thinking, that's not a camera bag, it's a backpack. It's a camera bag. You might think that this is a camera bag. These old little guys, this is your grandfather's camera bag. But this is a modern camera bag that can fit pretty much everything that I have, everything that I need to record guitar building videos here in the shed. So I don't want to keep delicate things like cameras in the shed, so I basically haul them back and forth from here to the main house, and I can fit everything in here. And I want to kind of go through what I use, and not just the lenses and the cameras, but the lights too. I built a rafter system up here to house a 3-point lighting system, so I have a main fill light, a key light, and then I have a hair light above there. And I also have some incidental lights, some practical lights in the back too, that I can talk about. But for the most part today, I'm going to talk about my wireless system, the audio mics that I use, the lights and the cameras and the lenses and everything else that I have in this camera bag. So let's go ahead and pop the camera bag open, take a look inside, and also show you how I set up everything. That means setting up the audio, setting up the cameras, setting up the lights, and then kind of tearing it down at the end of the session. Let's hop into the bag. Start with this first pocket here. This is where I keep my LED panel light and the LED panel charger and the LED panel battery. So off camera right now, above here, I have an overhead tripod that I can lower, and it has the LED panel, so I'll show you. And that's the LED panel right there. And I use this for overhead lights. I think this is something that's super necessary. You want to have proper lighting. And it's really convenient because it's over the head. You can't see it in the shot, in the main A camera shot, and I can lower it whenever I need it. And this pocket just houses this. So I keep the battery and the battery charger in here for that panel, as well as this accessory right here that lets me take that panel and not only just use it up above, but I can connect this to the hot shoe of my cameras, any cameras or tripods, and use the panel with those. So it's just a diffused LED panel. Diffused lighting is super important, and this is the pocket I keep all that in. So since we're still outside the bag, I do have a tiny little tripod. This is sort of the main tripod that I use. One of the things that I've discovered in the shop is I don't want a tripod on the floor, because I'm always walking around the bench, the CNC, grabbing tools, and those tripods that are on the floor get in the way. So I've mounted everything on rafters. The only tripod that I actually use is really this one, because it's a tabletop tripod, and it's stored right here in this mesh bag, and it's got a little clip, so I can clip it in. It makes it super convenient, again, to carry this wherever I go and wherever I need it. This is an actual real deal tripod. I can actually extend this pretty tall if I needed to, and I can move this and manipulate it on the tabletop. So a tabletop tripod is super necessary when I'm getting those close shots and those close macro shots. So we'll start at the top here, which has some incidentals as well. So one of the things I have is this tiny little stand that uses this light. So you may have seen this in all my videos. It's essentially an LED light, but it has a lens, a big fat lens on there. I'll get some close-ups of this. And it lets me project the light onto the wall behind me. It's like a purple light. And it isn't like these purple lights. You can see there's not a lot of diffusion. It's just a really short burst of light. This has a lens which can get as big as you want depending on how far back you are. So it really does act like a projector of sorts. And it's just, again, to make that boring backdrop behind me colorful. And so I keep this in that little Velcro pocket here above. Since we're on the A camera right now, we'll just talk a little bit about the B camera. I guess the first thing we should talk about is the video itself. I shoot in 4K, and that's a choice that I've made. I know there's a lot of statistics out there that may say that 90% of people don't watch videos in 4K, that they watch them in 1080p. That's cool, but the real question is, why wouldn't you shoot in 4K if you could? I think there's some debate on whether, like, maybe the file size is too big, maybe your computer can't handle the editing. But in the end, it comes down to one thing, and that is just future-proofing your content. So you've probably been on YouTube before where you do a search. I'll give you an example. I was searching for tube amp repair a while back. And you come across some videos, right? And some might be in 720, some might be in HD, some might be in a standard definition, lower than 720. And it's an easy choice to make, right? I'm not gonna click on those old videos. I'm gonna click on something that's higher quality. In fact, if we're thinking about the far future, you might have a young kid doing a search for fret dressing and they're gonna be opted with a couple more choices, 10K, right? 6K, and then 4K and 1080, and it's pretty clear which ones they're gonna be watching. The 1080s won't even get a shot. So that's why I shoot in 4K, and that's just a future-proof content. So now comes the next thing. It's like, well, what's the least expensive way to shoot in 4K? And that is your phone, right? But I want manual control over everything. So I found that the cheapest alternative for shooting in 4K are these crop sensors, right? So it's all mirrorless, right? My A camera is mirrorless and my B camera is mirrorless, and they're both different brands. So this is a Lumix, so it's the Panasonic G7, and it's a micro four thirds, right? So it's got a smaller cropped sensor. So what that really means is that when I'm shooting with a particular lens, this is a 25mm lens, because there's a cropped sensor, I'm really shooting in like 50mm. There's a formula out there that you can use to kind of figure out what your actual focal length is. I don't care about that. All I know is that it gives me the shot that I want, right? So you can go full frame. I think that's eventually what everybody wants. You want a full frame camera, but for what we do, the only advantage full frame is giving you is really a bigger sensor, right? So more light, so you can rely less on these studio lights and shoot in natural lighting. And that's a really cool advantage, but probably not necessary. And you can really save a lot of money if you go with the crop sensor. So this is a micro four thirds Lumix, and the A camera is a Sony, which is the APC cropped sensor for Sony. And so with that being said, this is my B camera, and it is a workhorse. I've dropped it like so many times. It's full of like gunk. So you know when you're working on guitars, I mean, there's probably like glue residue on here, epoxy residue. I'm just touching it and I don't care about it. This is a tool. That's the other thing you think about. If you're babying your cameras, you're less likely to kind of use them in really precarious situations. I use this in every single situation for pretty much everything that isn't a talking head, right? So that camera there is really just doing one job. It's making me look pretty, right? This face here, this is the moneymaker. But this camera does everything else that's not my face. This is pretty much 90% of what you see in my videos. And the other thing too is like I know it back and forth. I know all the buttons, and I can even control this backwards, right? I can control like everything without even looking at it. And it's such a great little camera and a great format and a great platform. It shoots 4K. So this is a prime lens, right? I only shoot in prime lenses. That's the other thing too. The idea is if you have a lens that can do multiple focal lengths, you know, like a in and out kind of deal, that's not a prime lens. I only shoot in prime lenses. So this only shoots in 25mm. And I usually shoot wide open. So if you ever see my footage where like the background's like really blurry, that's the result of me just shooting wide open. I'm shooting at pretty much 1.7 on this 25mm prime lens. So this one goes down all the way to 1.7, that one goes down to 1.4, and I usually just stick around there and adjust the lighting if necessary, if it's like too bright. Because I like that wide open look and like the creaminess that it gives me. Shooting in that low ISO also gives me that's kind of filmic, cinematic creaminess that I'm going for. But yeah, this is my main camera. It's the Lumix G7 micro four thirds, and I have a couple of lenses. So this is the main lens you see, right? It's 25mm, but it equals about 50, right? But then you know that I love macro shots, so I have a macro lens. And this is a 60mm macro lens, and it basically stops down to 2.8. Here's the deal with macro shots, right? And macro lenses. A lot of the times, you'll get a macro lens that's, let's say, 30mm. In order to get the shot you need to be like this close. And you can't, as guitar builders, we can't work this close. So you need a 60mm lens at least so that you can be further away to get that same close macro shot. And this lens does the job. This is a manual lens, so it's not automatic, there's no electronics in it. I have to manually focus, which is what you do anyway when you're shooting macro. There's really not a lot of depth of field with macro shots. You have like very shallow depth of field to work with. But this is the 7 Artisans macro lens for micro four thirds, and I'll just pop it on there and I get all those really pretty little close shots. And that's the thing, perspective. What you want to show people is a perspective that they're not used to seeing every day. So if you put a tripod right here and you just point it down here, it's as if someone was standing there over your shoulder looking down. That's a perspective that they see every day. It is what they're used to. But if you show them things they're not used to, if you show people a perspective they're not used to seeing, it's a little bit more dramatic and a little bit more exciting. So getting those close macro shots, right? Those really close shots, that's not something they're used to seeing every day. They're not used to getting on their hands and knees and looking this close at an object. And so it's a little bit different and it's a little bit, I don't know, exciting. And try to stay away from the normal focal length of our eyes, which is what we're used to seeing every single day on a daily basis. So let's take a look at my main camera, which is my camera A. This is the Sony A6400 4K camera. What I have on here for the lens is the Sigma 16mm 1.4 lens. So a pretty beefy lens, really nice 4K camera, big screen. The other thing about these cameras, they're all touch screen. So touch to focus, all that good stuff. I can move the focus area around with my finger on both my B camera, which we're recording with right now, and this A camera. This camera here is just for my headshot, for my face when I'm talking. And I use my same wireless mic system for this. But what's really important about this camera is the lens. This is a 16mm wide lens, very wide. I want to be able to get really as much background as I possibly can in that direction. And I also want to get a really nice depth of field, so that's why this is a 1.4. And together, this lens is just amazing, having the 16mm plus the 1.4, and it's just really great for talking headshots. And because this is Sony, it has one of the best autofocus systems pretty much around, pretty much beats out everything else. I also shoot in RAW format, so the other thing about these 4K cameras, both my B camera up here and this A camera, is that they shoot in kind of like a RAW format, right? So Sony's shooting an S-Log, and the Panasonic Lumix is shooting their kind of version, and Canon has their own version. Every camera manufacturer has their own version of a RAW setting. And I recommend shooting in RAW and then doing your color gradings later, and we can get into color grading later, but all my videos color graded. So essentially, by shooting in RAW, it allows me to capture a higher dynamic range, which means is that I'm getting actual information in my shadows and actual information in my highlights. And then in post, when I'm color grading, I can bring out those details if I want to, but they're not lost. The blacks are not crushed, the whites are not blown out, and I think pretty much every professional YouTuber shoots in some sort of RAW format. Simple as that. That's really one of the main benefits to shooting with these cameras. So this is the A6400. It's a bargain. You know, this is certainly not cheap, but it's also not expensive relative to like a full frame camera, which is thousands of dollars. This guy does everything we needed to do for YouTube. It shoots in 4K, it shoots in a RAW format, we can color grade the footage, we can attach whatever expensive lenses we like, touch screen, big screen, everything we need is right in here in this little package. And that's my A camera. So what I use is this remote for the Sony. This isn't a Sony remote. This is like the third-party, made in China one you get on Amazon. And it basically does what I need to do, which is start and stop recording. That way I don't have to go to the camera back there. And these are the batteries for the Sony. So I have 3 batteries for every camera. And that's all I need. And with 3 batteries, I rarely ever even go through 1 battery. I can do an entire video without ever having to change 1 battery. Pretty simple. And I guess that's because I don't really use this camera for anything except my talking head, and then I use the B camera for everything else. But I also have 3 batteries for the B camera that we're looking at right now. The other thing that we have here is a total essential, which is your white balance. Oh, shoot, I just popped out of my hand. You get it, right? This is one of these little white balance cards. So you have your neutral gray and you have your white to set your white balance. It folds up in that weird way where pops out like a almost can of snakes. But you need to set your white balance. And that's the other thing. Most people will shoot in an automatic mode. I don't shoot in auto mode. I don't think any real professional videographer shoots in automatic mode. So you want to shoot manual, you want to set your white balance properly with neutral gray, which is what we use these days, or the old, you can use the old school white, but you gotta have one of these. So I use the Deity wireless mic system. I guess its main competitor would be the Rode, and this is much less expensive than the Rode unit. And I guess the main reason I got it is because it comes in this Stormtrooper white, which I think is really cool. Got everything you need. You have transmitter, receiver, a little windscreen. You have your USB-C cables to charge, USB-C to connect to your camera, and then you got your lav mic there as well. Turn these on, and they pair very quickly. So you have two green LEDs. As soon as they're both illuminated, that means they're paired. The screen on here has tons of information, right? So we have the battery health of both the transmitter and the receiver on there, and of course the volume and your signal strength on there. And one of the cool things about this little guy is that he has a lock mechanism for the lav. So you put your lav mic in, right? And then you turn this and it basically locks it in there so you can't accidentally yank this out and lose your recordings. So this is not just a belt clip here on the receiver. It's also perfect size to fit into your hot shoe. You just slide that into your hot shoe and it sticks on your camera, or it slide and fit into any hot shoe style adapter on your tripod or whatever. Everything just fits back in here in place, so it's super easy to store this away. Everything has its own spot. These amazing little USB-C cables are just so cute. Got that yellow theme going on. And I can just zip it all up when I'm done and just throw this in my camera bag. Pretty neat. This is my other piece of audio gear that I have here. Is this little guy for using XLR microphones that require 48 volts of phantom power. And it'll accept two mics, and I have two independent channels for the stereo left-right, which means I could have a second person with their own mic, and I can individually adjust the gain, and then in post bring those back down to mono. That way you have independent control over two signals. So this is really handy when I'm using my cardioid mic, when I'm doing like overhead shots inside, and I record straight to the camera. It's just more convenient that way. So this is my overhead mount right here. So I have a whole Raptor system set up. I'll just pan up so you can see. The idea is it's a bunch of wood, and I have two bars coming down. And this one's adjustable, so I can adjust this going up and down, so I can move it up so it's out of the shot for the main talking head camera. And then I can move it down as low as I need to for any type of overhead shots. And I also have my LED diffused lighting here to handle this, but this is my B camera, basically looking down at the bench, so it looks down all the way down to the bench. Right, so these are the Raptors that I built above my workbench. And that right there is a light stand hung upside down. So what I did was I took these normal photography lights and I placed a hook at the bottom of it and then like a loop up on top so that I can hang them upside down. And so the other cool thing about this hook mechanism is that I tend to use these lights indoors too in my office when I'm shooting, or when I'm shooting photography, like photographs of my guitars, and so I can unhook them and then use them normally like upright as stands when I'm photographing guitars. So they serve a dual purpose. So I have a fill light as well on the left-hand side. This is also hung from a rafter. Also, it's on a hook, so I can use this light stand for normal photography on a stand, or just hanging upside down as my fill light right here. So this is on the left side of my bench. So this is my hair light. This is the third light in the 3-point lighting system. It's a really dim light. It doesn't actually illuminate much. It's just to really add highlights to your head to make you stand out from the background. And I have practical lights, which are just incidentals using colored LEDs. And this is just providing a little bit of texture and a little bit of dynamic lighting to the backdrop. And I have 3 of these. So I have that one, 2 additional ones here, providing just a little bit of extra off my right shoulder. These are just standard, the cheapest lamps you can get, really. And I just spray painted them flat black. So in this shot, you could see the 2 lights, the key light and the fill light, pointing at my bench, which is right there. So this is the opposite side of the camera. And the really cool thing about these lights is they're off the ground and they're also retractable. So I don't walk around my shop with these lights like this. They actually telescope up all the way out of the way so I can actually walk under them, and I'll show you what that looks like. So right now I've retracted that light, and you can see it's absolutely out of the way. My main camera A is on this arm that has an elbow, and then that elbow comes out to another elbow, and then it ends up on my quick release ball on top of that as well. So I get lots of articulation, and I can put my camera pretty much any position I want, but it's in one static position because this is my main view for my videos. And it's off the ground, so there's nothing under it. So I can walk by this and I can walk past this every day. There's nothing under it. It's not on a tripod. So this was totally different. Not our usual guitar building video, but due to the sheer amount of contestants in this year's Great Guitar Build-Off, I think a video like this is valid. We are not just exploring the processes of guitar building, but also the processes of documenting guitar building. And this might be a useful video to a lot of folks who don't even know where to jump in when it comes to things like camera and lenses and lights. So this is a series that I think I might continue. We haven't even gotten into the realm of video editing and color grading and audio processing. Believe it or not, there's a fair amount of audio processing happening right now with my voice being recorded in this mic. I use compressors and limiters and EQs and noise gates. I really like this idea of removing my breath from my speaking. And so I have a chain of plugins to do that for me. This might not be something you're interested in, but if it is, just let me know, and I'll continue with this series. One thing I know that I will do is probably explore my processes for recording music for YouTube. That is a whole other thing. In any case, this was a weird one. Thanks for watching, and take it easy.